we need to talk about what Anthony Mackie said and why it proves my point that a lot of MCU fans really need to do their research, not read the comics, but do their research into the comics before they comment on things in regards to the comics. In an interview, Anthony Mackie explained what Captain America means to him, and he said, and I quote, "Captain America represents a lot of different things, and I don't think the term America should be one of those representations. It's about a man who keeps his word, his honor, dignity, and integrity." In 2011, Chris Evans had this to say about Captain America. "I'm not trying to get too lost in the American side of it. This isn't a flag-waving movie. It is red, white, and blue, but it just so happens that the character was created in America during wartime when there was a common enemy, even though it is Captain America. I've said before in interviews, it feels more like he should just be called Captain Good. You know, he was created at a time when there was an undeniable evil, and this guy was kind of created to fight that evil. I think that everyone could agree that Nazis were bad. And he, Captain America, just so happens to wear the red, white, and blue." The Too Long Didn't Read origin of Captain America, and if you want the longer version, it's on my TikTok channel, is that essentially two Jewish men created Captain America to be a piece of propaganda that got American people to care more about the war, specifically what was happening in Europe. The reason he is blue-eyed and blonde hair was because it was supposed to be ironic that Hitler's favorite race was going overseas to quite literally punch Hitler. And now I have said for a very long time, the way that the MCU treats Captain America, specifically MCU fans, bothers me because in this day and age where patriotism and nationalism oftentimes are seen as blurred instead of two completely separate things, a lot of people assume that Captain America would fall on the nationalist side of things instead of the true patriotic side of things. So the first recorded use of the term patriotism is used in the early 1700s per dictionary.com and their article about patriotism versus nationalism. And by the 1770s, patriot is used to refer to a, quote, member of a resistance movement, a freedom fighter. Sound familiar? Nationalism is referred to, quote, the policy or doctrine of asserting the interest of one's own nation viewed as separate from the interest of other nations or the common interest of all nations. According to this article, it goes on to explain that fascism oftentimes uses the term patriot as a way to identify like-minded individuals and traitor as those who don't view the same way. It goes on to state that this form of nationalism is what happens when patriotism gets out of hand and morphs into something more exclusionary, isolationist, and, well, chauvinist. The article ends by saying patriotism genuinely has a positive connotation and it is used for various positive sentiments, attitudes, and actions involving loving one's country and serving the greater good of all of its people. Again, sound familiar? Nationalism generally has a negative connotation. It is used for political ideologies and movements that are more extreme and exclusionary love of one's country, at the expense of foreigners, migrants, and even people in a country who aren't believed to belong in some way, often in racial or religious grounds. In the 70s, Steve Rogers becomes so enraged by the United States government due to what is called the secret invasion of a almost worse version of Hydra, a more radical version of Hydra taking over the government, that he drops the mantle of Captain America and becomes nomad because he does not want his ideals to represent the American ideals anymore because America has become corrupt. Steve Rogers, Sam Wilson, Bucky Barnes, and most of the individuals who have carried the mantle of Captain America have never, ever represented the American government. In fact, in one of his early comics, Steve Rogers says, quote, "I am loyal to nothing, General, except the dream," referring to the American dream. 2 of the 3 Captain America movies are him quite literally fighting against corrupt government, whether it is corrupt because Hydra has infiltrated it or it is corrupt because he views that the way that they are moving towards justice is unfair. In Captain America the Winter Soldier, he references a John F. Kennedy speech that goes, and I quote, "The cost of freedom is high, but Americans have always paid it, and one path we shall never choose, and that is the path of surrender or submission." In Captain America the Winter Soldier, he slightly alters this quote and saying, "The price of freedom is high, it always has been, but it is a price that I am willing to pay." And then finally, we have what I would say is probably Steve Rogers' most iconic speech in any of the media that we've seen him in, and I am going to read this for you now. "It does not matter what the press says, doesn't matter what the politicians or the mob say, doesn't matter if the whole country decides that something wrong is something right. This nation was founded on one principle above all else, the requirement that we stand up for what we believe, no matter the odds or the consequences. When the mob and the press and the whole world tell you to move, your job is to plant yourself like a tree beside the river of truth and tell the whole world no, you move. What Anthony Mackie said is what Captain America has always stood for. And if you don't believe that, after all of this proof that I have given you, this is not my opinion. I am reading directly from the source. Then I don't know what to tell you other than you need to take a media literacy class. Steve Rogers, Sam Wilson, Bucky Barnes, most of the individuals who have ever taken up the mantle have never been about protecting the American government. It has always been about protecting the American people and specifically its minorities. Like I said at the beginning of this, Steve Rogers was quite literally created by two Jewish men to protect the Jews of not only the United States, but of Europe. He was created to be an Irish immigrant's son to get other minorities behind him. He then goes on to pass the mantle to Sam Wilson, a black man who represents the black communities of our country, and to Bucky Barnes, who is supposed to represent the unvoiced veterans of our country. The mantle of Captain America has never represented the United States government. It has never represented the United States military. It has always represented the individuals of this country who feel they do not have a voice.